An experimenter's monkey is euthanized. The head of the Primate Center is fired. How long before the Washington National Primate Center is shut down? Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil, Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the fight to end cruel experiments at one of the nation's primate centers is coming closer to reality. PETA exposed the cruelty in the lab of Fritzie Arce-McShane at the University of Washington. One of her monkeys was so sick after being irradiated for several times a week, the monkey had to be euthanized. In another matter, PETA made the case to the UW Board of Regents that the head of the lab, Basso, was unfit to serve as its director due to repeated violations of the Animal Welfare Act throughout her career. And what did the university do? It listened to PETA. Both the Basso and Arce-McShane instances show the next step could be a total shutdown of the primate lab, says PETA primate scientist Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel. Dr. Jones-Engel used to work at UW and explains the significance of the recent developments on this edition of the PETA Podcast with Emil, Guillermo. Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, it's good to have you once again on the PETA Podcast.
I am always happy to be here and speaking with you, Emil.
Well, and same here. We're always happy. But just in case some people are just tuning in for the first time, Lisa, you're a primate scientist. You're PETA's senior science advisor. That's no small thing. Tell us about your background. And you could be brief because people can always Google you and find out just all the great things you've done. But tell us about your background as a primate scientist.
I spent 30 plus years, Emil, looking at how infectious diseases move between humans and primates. So I spent 30 years in the biomedical industry, in the laboratories, hand rearing animals, out in the fields in Asia and Africa, looking at disease transmission, in the laboratory as an investigator at the University of Washington at the Primate Center. And when it became absolutely obvious that these unintended diseases in the monkeys were harming the animals, were harming the science, harming the people, I was done. I came to PETA.
See, this is the significance about having someone like you. This is like, yes, I was in there with General Lee, and then I escaped the Confederates and joined the Union Army, or something. That's sort of what this is about, right?
That's exactly what it's about. Not only do I escape, I know what's in all the closets, what's in all the drawers, what's behind all the doors, and that's a pretty powerful position to be when you're then sitting in PETA and you have the ability for PETA to basically, I can't tell you the amount of information they put in front of me that I can then help PETA understand.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. PETA goes to great lengths to get undercover people to find out, because the truth is always hard to extract. But when when there's someone like yourself who has seen, I mean, as you put it, what's in the closet, where the bodies are buried, as the phrase goes. That is an advantage because when they're telling the truth and when they're lying.
Exactly. And I know that when they're speaking, the kind of things to key in on, and that's actually what happened over the past few weeks. The university officials were speaking. They were saying things that then, if you listened closely, if you understood what the acronyms meant, if you understood what the big words meant, if you knew what they weren't saying, you could then find the rest of the pieces and put together something that actually has hit UW at its core.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because there were some very big cases. But first, you called it UW. That means you have a sort of sentimental value there, or attachment. UW, University of Washington. Tell us about the University of Washington's Washington National Primate Research Center at the University of Washington. Tell us, explain how it works and how it's a federal funded monkey laboratory and why PETA is trying to close it down.
The University of Washington's Primate Center, it's called now the Washington National Primate Research Center, has been at the University of Washington, UW, for more than 60 years. It has received, I think, over $1 billion in taxpayer funding. It has consumed tens of thousands of primates at this stage. It has a laboratory. It built its most recent facility underground, 30 feet underground. It's under lock and key, behind closed doors. There's no, you have to know the monkey facilities there. You can't see them unless you're sharing an elevator with them. You can't smell them unless you're down in the loading dock and you see all those red biohazard bags go by, or you get a whiff of the monkey feces and ooh and goo coming out of the garbage area. And that's the way the university wants it.
But why is it treated as if it were top secret? Is it top secret, or is it just something that they're ashamed of?
It's something that they're ashamed of. Absolutely. It's when you put monkeys in a cage, you put a primate in a cage, you deprive them everything that makes them a living being. No one can see that and not be undone by that. And the University of Washington knows that. They know that if Seattle residents or UW students and faculty and staff saw what was going on in those facilities on the day-to-day basis, not the frilly little tours that they occasionally allow people to come in on, but if they saw the 12 hours of darkness, if they saw and heard the screaming and the cage rattling and the monkeys without the hair and the head-posted monkeys, people would come unglued and this place would be shut down in a heartbeat. And UW cannot afford to let that be seen. And
yet, under the guise of science, they think it's okay to do it as long as it's hidden. Is that it?
I'm beginning to wonder if they even think that it's okay to do it, because they're slowly starting to change. They are seeing that their experiments, their actions are being observed, and they're concerned. They truly are.
And so tell me, Lisa, what have they had to show for it? And why is it that PETA is trying to shut it down? Is it because they have nothing to show for it?
So they've been around for more than 60 years, and they've had well over $1 billion in taxpayer funding that they have absorbed. What do they have to show for it? They have the Primate Center used to be one of the places where they were trying to develop HIV vaccines. They used a different species of monkey, a monkey that is now endangered, the pigtail macaque. And they argued since the mid-1980s, this pigtailed macaque will give us vaccines to use to prevent people infected with AIDS or with HIV. We all know that hasn't worked out. They use these animals to try to develop vaccines for tuberculosis or for malaria. They make big promises. Those vaccines don't exist. So there's a big difference between what the university promises and says that they're doing and what they actually deliver. The University of Washington Primate Center cannot deliver on their promises.
And this is a truism that I've picked up from doing interviews like this. The amount of good that comes out of animal research, or the amount of real positive stuff for humans, it's like it's really small. 95% of animal research really ends in nothing, right?
That is still absolutely true. You can talk, maybe an easier way to even think about it is kind of the harm benefit analysis. It's the harm to the animals. It's the harm of the misdirected taxpayer funding. How much greater is that harm than any demonstrable benefit that can be shown? And that balance is you can't see me doing this, but I got my harm arm well above my head and my benefit arm is down near my toes. It doesn't work. And it's increasingly obvious it doesn't work because now we have all these non-animal methods that are coming on, and those are improving health.
And so this is one reason, or one of the, essentially the reason why PETA wants places like the Washington National Primate Research Center shut down. So let's go to the news that happened just recently. And this is the 29th of August. UW has decided to euthanize a monkey who was being irradiated nearly to death by a UW experimenter, her name Fritzie Arce-McShane. Why is this a significant thing in your mind as a primate researcher?
Arce-McShane did the unthinkable. No, not the unthinkable, because I think probably too many experimenters think about it, but she got caught. She had an approved protocol that would allow her to irradiate this monkey twice a week, to have a head post in this monkey, to do her experiments, to put a scope down his mouth and see how he's chewing and how he's swallowing. She decided she didn't want to follow that protocol. She just said, nah, that's not convenient for me. I want to irradiate him 3 days a week in a row. I don't want to put the protective goggles over his eyes because it gets in the way of these radio opaque markers I had embedded into his cheeks. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it my way. And when she did that, she basically killed this monkey. She caused so much pain and suffering and injury and trauma to this animal. I'm not even sure you want me to describe what it's like. And she lied about it. She lied about it to the veterinarian staff who came in.
Well, so this was May 14th to June 26th, this radiation on this adult male macaque on 3 consecutive days each week for more than a month. And the monkey was this was affecting the monkey physically in all sorts of ways, a loss of appetite.
Oh, it was horrible. It's, radiation overexposure, it manifests first in the skin. You see the skin reddening. You can see dry, flaky skin. You get swelling of the lips and of the body. You just feel terrible. So yeah, you stop wanting to eat. This poor guy couldn't open his mouth after a point. And again, the thing I have to emphasize is when she in her lab started seeing this, she was like, so they called in the veterinary staff and they said, fix my monkey. She did not tell the veterinary staff at that point that she had been violating her protocol, that she had been giving him more radiation exposure than she allowed. A week later, this monkey crashes. He's bad. She calls him back in, the veterinary staff, and she said, yeah, well, I guess maybe I forgot to mention the fact that I'm blasting this guy with radiation 3 days a week.
Yeah, and this is an experimenter in the UW School of Dentistry's Department of Oral Health Sciences. What kind of breakthrough or what kind of findings can they get from this kind of experimentation? Is it significant?
This experimenter has gotten more than $9 million in funding from the National Institutes of Health since 2018, I believe. $9 million. And her experiments are to see how the tongue and the lips and the mouth move as an animal swallows. Now she puts it in this guise of, if we understand this, we may be able to understand how I think she argued that it was how Alzheimer's patients, how their mouths and lips move as they progress in their disease. This monkey does not have Alzheimer's. This monkey the oral anatomy, the facial anatomy is not like a human's facial anatomy. Their tongue doesn't move the same way. They don't have the same kind of configuration and orientation of the teeth and shape of teeth. Yet she had been using this monkey since she has 6 more in her lab to do this. And so she would stick this tube down his throat 3 days a week. Radiation would be part of that experiment. And she wanted to see how I guess I forgot to mention this part. This monkey would have been chaired. He would have been in a chair. He had a head post. His head post would have been locked back so that his head couldn't move. His chin would have been in a spot. And he was almost certainly food and fluid restricted. And she would give him a little sip of water or a little bite of food and watch and video record this.
And now Arce-McShane, who Fritzie Arce-McShane is her name. She's the experimenter. She eventually, after denying it, eventually admitted her misconduct, but she blamed an inconsistent wording in the protocol rather than acknowledging that she has violated the Federal Animal Welfare Act. Is there anything inconsistent in the protocol?
That was a really interesting part of this whole thing, Emil, is because again, so we are watching this from a distance. We don't have a copy of the protocol. You know, we attended the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee meetings where this was reported out. And, you know, so Arce-McShane argued that, you know, I actually really meant to be able to do this 3 days a week in a row. I'm sorry if it didn't. I mean, that's what I meant when I wrote it. That's what was my intention. But that's not what it said in her protocol. Her protocol also said, put the goggles on the monkey's eyes. And she was like, that wasn't convenient for us.
So all of this wouldn't have happened unless PETA requested the university to stop the study.
No, I'm not sure I can say that. I mean, I'm going to give the University of Washington a little bit of credit here. I do believe part of their willingness to act so forcefully this time is because they know PETA has been staring at them with laser focus. You know, this did come to the Animal Oversight Committee. There was an extensive discussion about this. Now, at the end of that first meeting on August 15th, the ICOOC did not decide to suspend her protocol. They did not decide to sanction her. They sent her a letter of reprimand. You bad experimenter, you. But she had another amendment that was being reviewed. They were willing to let her keep going. Now, that afternoon, when we heard about this, you know, we went out and we said to University of Washington, no, stop it. Don't let this woman ever touch another animal, never monkey. Take that monkey, take them away from her, send him to sanctuary. He's already been abused enough. Get him out of her hands. We came out with that. And it wasn't until yesterday when a surprise meeting of the oversight body was called that we learned things had gotten so much worse. In the ensuing 2 weeks, that animal, despite intensive supportive treatment, he just wasn't getting better. He just, there was no coming back. The veterinarian said, there's only one humane option here. We need to kill him.
So they euthanized the animal. And what does that indicate to you? That the euthanization of this animal, is this a turning point in the way the university is looking at primate research?
The amount of whether voluntary or enforced transparency that we are seeing for this particular incident is pretty unheard of for the university. The fact that they would make the decision that this animal has reached an endpoint, even though the investigator, Arce-McShane, wanted to keep using this monkey. She's like, let me do a few more experiments with him so I can then I'll kill him so I can have my data. The university veterinarian stepped in and said, no, he is suffering at this point. We're cutting this off. Now, two very interesting things happened during that oversight meeting yesterday. One, an ICOOC member said, can't we send this animal to sanctuary? I've never heard an ICOOC member bring that up before.
And ICOOC, of course, stands for the
Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. So that's the Animal Oversight Committee.
Right.
So a member of it said, recognizing that this animal had suffered, and maybe having read our news release saying, send this animal to sanctuary. But they said, can he go to sanctuary? And I watched the attending veterinarian pause for a moment and say, look, I know everyone loves this monkey. He's a very well-loved monkey, but his quality of life is such that it's so bad, we can't send him to sanctuary. The humane thing is to euthanize him right now.
And it was all due to Arce-McShane's experiments. And so the monkey has been euthanized. What about the 6 other monkeys? What do they say about the ones in her lab? What happens to them? And what happens to Arce-McShane now that this main monkey that she's experimented on has been euthanized?
The 6 other monkeys in her lab, that was a very interesting discussion. So Arce-McShane has, and I'm putting big air quotes here, has told the iCook that she has voluntarily stopped any of her experiments right now. Now, I will say that we also learned yesterday that as the oversight committee was investigating Arce-McShane, they found, and they didn't say exactly what, but they found additional protocol violations that we had not yet learned about. So this woman is, this woman was so far off the rails when it comes to what she was doing to these animals. But something very interesting also took place in the iCook meeting yesterday. One of the other members said, well, those 6 monkeys, are they just going to sit there? I could actually see her eyes thinking, ooh, I wonder if I could have them for my laboratory, since, the university has not gotten to the point where they consider monkeys anything but laboratory equipment.
And so what happens to Arce-McShane? Is she done, or does she just get new monkeys? Is she sanctioned and can't, do more work at the Primate Center, or is this just a tap on the wrist for her?
This is a really good question. I think we're going to see this unfold over the next few weeks. The iCook could have made the decision right then and there, or even 2 weeks ago, to say, this investigator, we are not going to allow her to use monkeys at our university. They had the power to do that, to completely suspend, to end her experiments. They didn't. They didn't do that yesterday either. They said, oh, well, she's voluntarily stopped, so we don't have to do anything right now. She has another protocol that she's going to submit that's going to be reviewed. Will the iCook approve it? I hope not. I mean, this investigator has already demonstrated beyond a doubt she doesn't follow her protocols. She doesn't care about animal welfare, and she's beholden to no one. So the only thing that can stop her is the iCook at this point.
So we'll have to see if the euthanization, the order to euthanize the monkey, is really a change, or if they will continue to let this experimenter, Arce-McShane, do her thing, which has been cruel and unusual to her primate studies, the monkeys. That's one big story, and we'll continue to follow it. But the other big story is the director of the Primate Center itself, Michelle Basso, was demoted. And this is following PETA's letter to the Board of Regents, which outlined a very problematic leadership of the Primate Center. And you were part of, I believe you drafted that letter. Tell me about Michelle Basso.
Not only did I draft it, not only did I write it, I, in my alter ego as Dorothy, A15378, one of the monkeys at the Primate Center, actually delivered it to the Board of Regents. This was Michelle Basso, also a neuroscientist. Arce-McShane is a primate neuroscientist. Michelle Basso, primate neuroscientist. Basso also violated her protocol. She did things to monkeys that should never be done to monkeys. She bullied staff. She used the Primate Center as her own personal playground, which is that has been the habit that's of the Primate Center directors at the University of Washington. And what we did is we went to the Board of Regents and we outlined every single one of Basso's failings at the university, her history, the fact that she's a repeat offender. And we said to them, you can't have someone like this leading a primate center, someone who has the guardrails don't exist for her anymore when she's the director. And less than 2 months later, Basso was out.
She has had a career in places like University of Wisconsin-Madison, UCLA. Her experiments include things like invasive surgeries, like cutting holes into primate skulls. I mean, this is pretty typical, but what put this over the top? What made her at UW really the wrong person to lead the National Primate Research Center there?
Because Michelle Basso has a history of believing that the laws, the regulations do not apply to her. And at every previous spot, she has been in trouble. University of Wisconsin, she had her monkey lab shut down. At UCLA, she had the Iacocca there basically say, you can't do this stuff. You stop. And she's like, no, you're not talking to me. And then she left and came to the University of Washington, the Primate Center. And nothing changed there. She just continued. This woman kept falling up. No one would stop her. No one would step in and say, what you're doing is wrong. It's bad science. It's bad welfare. Get out. Until we did. And we said it very loudly. And I think if you were under Michelle Basso in the Primate Center, if you were a veterinarian and you tried to push back, I think you probably had Michelle Basso just kind of bulldoze over you. So we helped the Board of Regents. We laid it all out in black and white for them, and they acted.
And that's sort of unprecedented, right? I mean, they're taking information from an animal rights organization, PETA, and taking it in, considering it, and then taking action. I don't know. Is that normal?
That was my first experience with it, because keep in mind, I mean, I've been at this with the University of Washington for 5 years. I've written a lot of letters. I've gone to the Board of Regents, made lots of public comments. And I thought that, I was just kind of talking into the wind. It was going in one ear and out the other. And PETA, UW would say, PETA doesn't know what it's talking about. PETA's lying about this. PETA is, misrepresenting this. PETA is picking and choosing this. And now the University of Washington is saying, looks like PETA's kind of got it all sorted out here. We're providing the information to them in a clear, digestible way from an outside perspective, an informed outside perspective. We're laying the data out there for them. We're putting the documents in front of them. And the university is now acting on these things.
So Michelle Basso is out. In some ways, that's a good sign, but in many ways, maybe they just should have shut down the Primate Center.
I think we're coming there. So this seems to be kind of how it works in these campaigns. It begins with, the institution or the lab or the facility saying, PETA doesn't know what it's talking about. PETA's lying. PETA's bad. And then they start acting on our information. They start making changes. People who shouldn't be there get canned. And then the facility gets shut down. So I think, Emil, I think the University of Washington Primate Center that clock is ticking very loudly for them now.
What's incredible is if they choose to replace Michelle Basso, who's out there in line among the applicants except, 10 other Michelle Basso types? I mean, are you going to get a saint in there saying, okay, we're going to follow protocol. We're going to be kind to the monkeys. Maybe we're not even going to experiment, but we're going to do something else, use some non-animal experiments to test against the bad stuff we're doing. I mean, It only makes sense that maybe, a shutdown is the next step.
The shutdown is the next step. The person that they have now in as interim director, Deb Fuller, she's not a neuroscientist. She focuses on infectious diseases. Deb Fuller uses imported, endangered long-tailed macaques in her experiments. She uses endangered, disease-ridden pigtailed macaques in her experiments. Deb Fuller is, her science is not good. Her animal welfare is really bad. And she's just, the fact that the University of Washington would tap her to be the interim director, I'm not quite sure how to interpret that, other than she just happened to be the next person in line. So all right, let's just elevate her. But I think that, no, she doesn't bring anything to this facility that's good.
So as you said a little earlier, that maybe the time is ticking and the end is coming. And I have to say, Lisa, this is where you can take maybe not the full victory lap, but you can take a mini one, because you've pushed things a little closer to that end by, your advocacy as a scientist for PETA. So I think that really is, you won't say it yourself, but I'll say it.
I think I have, but keep in mind, Emil, it's me and PETA. When I was in the University of Washington, when I was in the Primate Center, I was pointing out these things. I was going to the UW president. I was going to the UW leadership, to the ICOOC, saying, these are the problems. And I wasn't getting traction. It wasn't until I resigned my position and PETA came knocking on my door that this synergy of someone who knows the ins and outs, and PETA, this organization that has the ability and the willingness and the strength to just not stop. We are relentless. And I think UW had no idea that PETA, once we bid into this one, we are not letting go until they go down. And so they're going to go down.
Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, congratulations on this victory now, but the ultimate victory yet to come. We'll follow what happens to the replacement, if they name a full-time replacement to Basso, if something happens to the Primate Center, and if something further happens to Arce-McShane, the experimenter, whose monkeys have been, she's putting out a new protocol, so we'll see what happens in her future. But Lisa, thank you. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for explaining it to us here on the PETA Podcast.
Thank you.
PETA primate scientist Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel. For more on what you can do to hasten the end of the Washington National Primate Center, go to PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or see my vlog at AOMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. And get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by CarbonWorks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.